just move this over so that when the slide comes out, everybody can see it. And if anyone can't see it, would you be sure and tell me, or just stick your hand up? Okay. Money, money, money. Trin has asked me to talk to you about money. And first of all, I'll explain to you how I'm going to do it. I want to show you the very important facts that really are what's happening today, and why you should be very interested in what I have to say, and why you should develop a plan for yourself and use what I'm going to tell you about. I can't talk about everything because I'd be here all night if I did. So I'm going to take the three main types of investing that are in just about everything on the planet and explain each one to you and show you at the end a concrete example of how it affects your taxes, exactly by a case study in each case that you'll be able to see. And at the end I'll summarize it and I'll try and give you a few extra points. Now what I've been talking about will not be registered money as such, but all of these things can be used in registered money. When I say registered money, that's RSP money, which you get a big tax deduction for putting your money in it. But when you take it out, it is taxable. And TFSAs, which are your tax-free savings accounts, when you put the money in, you don't get any deduction, but when you take it out, it's tax-free. So that's your benefit there. But what I'm talking about is non-registered, but everything I'm talking about can be used in a registered plan, which is something some people don't realize today. And what I'd like to talk about first of all is why I want you to put these facts in the back of your mind, because they're the most important facts you'll ever find out. Number one, our governments are billions of dollars in debt, 600 I think plus for the federal government alone. Keep that in your mind. And it's continuing for a while from what I hear. And number two, Elizabeth Chu has just informed me, she's a director of chronic care in Mississauga. The chronic care facilities are mighty expensive to fund, and the government is looking to home care instead. So home care, you'll hear that word a lot on the news. That's the second point. And third, people are living longer. I have a whole circle of people around me who are 95 plus, and they're sharp as a razor mentally. And they're trying desperately to survive with their money. And sometimes they're making grave mistakes. And disabilities are on the rise. In my neighborhood of 10 people, I'm the only one who isn't disabled, of 10 people that I know. And if you have any idea how debilitating disability is to care for a person at home, it is anguish beyond reason. And if you can get help, you're going to have money. And I just was told this week that one lady, they desperately needed a cleaning lady. She's on oxygen. $30 an hour to get a cleaning lady. That's only one thing. And most of us want good health, and we want good health care in our senior years. Now, to say the medical system is going to be where we're going to need the money, I can show you what's already started by the prime example who's standing right in front of you. I'm a bionic woman. Have you ever heard of a bionic woman? Well, I have cataracts on my eyes that there are lens and back. When I had that surgery, I had to fork over almost $1,000 to get the latest surgery, which was laser treatment, or I settled for the not as exact, or the laser is the best thing. Well, but I've got my bionic eyes and I see a mosquito on the wall now, and I'm thankful I had that $1,000. Number two, I got 2 hearing aids. If a senior has to buy hearing aids, you've got to pay a couple of thousand. I know somebody walking around with $4,000 of hearing aids. I don't have 4,000 worth because I bargain, and I had an insurance policy. So that's number 2. I'm so thankful, but I hear every day of someone who can't afford to get hearing aids. It's tragic. Can you imagine going around in a world of silence? It's terrible. And number 3, I'm thankful for this because I didn't have to pay a nickel for it. I've got a stent in my heart that keeps my artery open so I can still work. Isn't that great? Every bit of it was paid for. And just because maybe I had blonde hair, I had a private room because they had no other rooms available. So I was in a private room and had it all done. So this is something about the future to be prepared for. And that's why you should be concerned about money. Take care of it, treasure it, don't squander it. If you squander it, you're going to pay the price. And the next slide, the first slide I'll have Ron put up, will be on the first type, and I'll give you the risks involved in all these things. The number one, which probably everybody knows about, is interest income. Anybody not know about interest income? Well, interest income, you lend your money to the bank or to a trust company or to whoever, and they pay you interest. And there's different ways you can get it, but when you think about a bank account, the latest bank account that I researched online, you can't get 1% on a savings account. It's about 0.6 and this bank that I checked out, and you'd have to have 5,000 in to get that rate. So that's a very low rate. Now, if you go a step, if you go to Canada savings bonds, which about 25 years ago, everybody was going for Canada savings bonds because you save them for your grandkids. But today, the average 10-year benchmark is 1.89%. And the 3-year bond benchmark is 0.51%. So you're not getting very much there. And if you go a little bit up, you go to corporate bonds. What I mean by that is bonds that are issued by companies like Bell Canada, any of the big companies in Canada, anywhere. They would issue a bond and they would pay you interest. You would give them the money and they'd pay you interest. You'll get a little bit more for it, for your money, but you're not going to get that much. I checked one bond fund and it had US, let's see, it would have corporate bonds and government bonds of Canada. Now, a bond fund will stabilize your portfolio. This bond fund goes up because when interest rates are low, it fares very well, but it can't fare too well because the interest rates are so darn low. But it was averaging about close to 2%, but it was going quite, it doesn't do the volatility that other investments do. And of course, with a corporate bond, you're taking a little bit more risk because the government guarantees their bonds. With corporate bonds, you don't know if the company is going to be okay or not. If you pick a good solid company, you'll be okay. But sometimes you can misjudge on anything. And when I put down, and of course, if it's higher risk, which is a company, the higher the risk, they have to pay you a little bit more because you're taking the risk. Do you see what I mean there? And junk bonds, they're very risky. What I mean by junk bonds is a company that may not have a good credit rating, so it can't get a loan at a bank or something like that. It has to go to a shark somewhere or to an outside dealer to get a loan. So if they have to have added risk, they will give you more money because you have to take more risk. They're a riskier company. And you don't know whether it's going to go belly up or not. It could go bankrupt. This is where you don't know. And you have the interest rate risk with bonds is the fact that if interest rates rise, your bond may be in for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. It's invested at a lower rate, so its value is going to go down because the interest rates have gone up and you could get a new bond at a higher rate, but you could pay a penalty to get out of that bond. But if you have a bond fund, the bond manager will know that. He will adjust those bonds and buy new. He will go short term when he knows interest rates are going to go up higher. It's tricky to understand bonds, just the average person. But basically, it will stabilize. It's wise as you get older. We always put a few bonds in our portfolios because we need something to ease the volatility investments. Okay, our next one. And just a moment, I just want to say one thing about the most important detail. I was leading to the end of this one. The biggest risk you have with interest-bearing incomes, and I see this every day with seniors, we are held for ransom because look at the rate I just quoted you on all of those bonds. Well, let's think about inflation. Now, if you don't know what inflation is, 5 years ago when I first retired, I could go to the grocery store and buy $100 worth of groceries. Well, today when I go, I've got to pay 110 bucks. And my grandmother grumbled in the 50s when butter was 50 cents a pound. And today I checked it, I think it's $5 or $6 a pound. Right? Anybody can agree with that?
Mhm.
That's what I mean by inflation. And if you put all of your money in something that's only earning 1%, and the latest rates for inflation, or from the Bank of Canada, over the last 2 years is 3.05. Are you any better off? We're held for ransom. We've got to go riskier whether we like it or not, or we don't survive if we're going to live to be 95 years old. My mother did. She put her money under the bed though. So that's the highest risk. So, and the second part is now when the older population is panicky. Oh, I missed one. Sorry, go back there. Oh, I should be going back there. I just want to mention one more thing. When the seniors panicked, when the investments were very low like that, they did one thing. They went into these. They're called REITs. I'll explain what that means. Does anyone know what it means? Oh, okay. Well, I'll explain it, Andrews. And it's Real Estate Investment Trusts. And that tells you what it's in. It's in real estate. And the biggest one in Canada is the RioCan, RIOCAN. And what they are is a group of investments that must be, of course, in real estate. And this one is in shopping plazas of US and Canada. And how do you benefit there? Now these seniors were all gung-ho on this, not realizing they swung all their money into it. And they didn't realize it trades on the exchange, on the TSX. Now it looked pretty good because some of the rates they were getting was interest and you get some capital gains on it. But the trick to it was they had a tax saving which was called a return of capital. That's what Revenue Canada calls it. And at some point, I read some of them, they were 60% of their earnings were the return of capital, which of course would be totally tax-free. Now, it technically isn't a return of their own money. That's what Revenue Canada calls it. But it's an accounting principle that they use, and it'd be too difficult for me to explain it. You wouldn't understand it anyway, because it's not worth, but they call it return of capital because that's where you get your tax saving. Well, like everything on the stock exchange, it has its day. It went gung-ho when the seniors are happy as large, but they put everything in it, and then the market went down. And they panicked. But if they'd stayed with it, it's still today, now I see it's reviving. And it's paying about, I think it was being 6 and 7%. Is that right, Andrew? It's around 6 anyway. I might be a little out there, but it's around 6%, which is much better than a 1% return. So that is interest income and your risk. And the next part, number 2, is what we call, and now the seniors, I was in touch with a professor in Guelph, and I got information from all over the world from him. He sent me all kinds of emails, and I followed everything because I had studied this myself. And this was the next step up that seniors are thinking about, because this is a terrific tax rate on your income tax. You'll see it at the end too. It's called dividend income, and all that means is you're sharing in the profits of companies. And I'm talking about companies in Canada that can be eligible companies or ineligible. The corporation itself will decide what kind of a company it is, and the biggest tax break comes from the eligible companies, because and that's the one I'm going to show you the slide on, because that's the one most of us would be involved in, because it gives you the highest credit on your income tax. And there are 2 types of shares, and these mean shares of the company. There are preferred shares, which you usually pay the fixed dividend. The shares of the company I'm talking about, or the companies. They pay a fixed dividend, and in the event of bankruptcy, the main thing to know about preferred shares are that they take precedence in the case of bankruptcy over the common shares, which are the publicly traded shares. And they can be there are several different kinds of them. The retractable means that they can be called in by the company, and they'll give you either cash, or they might say you can have so many common shares for it. Or they could be reset. They reset it every once in a while. The rate would be a little different. And the floating rate goes according to the prime rate. Whenever the prime rate changes, it would change. The dividends would change. And the common shares usually have the voting rights, and they pay dividends. And these are usually all from the largest and most productive companies in Canada. In fact, 70% of the earnings on the stock exchanges are due to dividends, which I just found that out myself. I didn't realize what the percentage was. And they are now talking about ineligible and eligible. I'll show you on a slide when we get to the very end, some more details on that. Okay, the next strategy is capital gain. Andrew, what's a capital gain? Check your brains.
The improvement in the share price.
That's great. And it's a gain if you buy something and it costs more than what you paid for it. What's the opposite to it? What's the opposite? Anybody want to answer that one?
Loss.
Capital loss.
Loss, a net capital loss. And something seniors have forgotten, and not so much today, I think, as the old days, but I ran across a few. If you don't declare that loss, you can't write it off against an income. You have to declare it so that when you have a gain, you could write off that gain and get it tax-free. And you've got to remember that little point, because your losses can always offset the gains, and you can go back 3 years if you forgot it or if somebody didn't tell you about it. You can go back and do an adjustment on your taxes, or you can carry it forward as long as, so far today, if the government doesn't change the rules. You have to keep following things to see if they change the rules. And usually you have a capital gain on just about in mutual funds. It can be in shares in companies. You can even have capital gains and losses on bonds. So, and the next slide, this one is probably the one you'll be most interested in. It's going to give you some actually concrete facts, and you're going to look at it and think I'm crazy at one, but it's true. And I'll just, can you see it all on this side? This is interest income. This is assuming a single person under the age of 65 has $50,000 in interest income first. Interest income, remember, is 100% taxable at whatever rate you have, eh? And this is a single person under the age of 65. So his tax or her tax would be $9,171. Now dividends, eligible dividends are very special in Canada, and this is what a lot of people are doing. They can have mutual funds invested all in dividends. You can have ETFs, other different things. I'll talk about them after. But dividends are grossed up by 1.38%, and then you take 15.0195. Oh, I got the wrong. This is wrong. It's 0.0195 there. It's 15.02% of the gross up. I thought I had corrected on this one. It must have showed again. And then you only have to pay $600 on the dividends. So you see, it's quite a tax saving. And a couple earning $96,000, one of them disabled, with about $30,000 in dividend income, and they're getting the old age pension, the Canada pension, and a little bit of self-employed income, can walk away. Now you won't believe it, but it's true. I found it out 30 years ago, and even today, and they can pay only $4,000 tax in dividend income. And this, years ago, I first learned about that. A man came into it. I was working for Hershaw Block, and I thought I'd made a grave mistake because he had $50,000 in dividend income. At that time, you got it with no tax at all, absolutely free. And I thought, and of course, it was checked in the head office at Hershaw Block, and it came back right. So that's what was that part. And the next part is capital gains, which if you buy something and it gains, say it gains $1,000, you've got a capital gain of $1,000. But the capital gain is half of it. Only half is taxable, so your tax there would be $3,115 there. So these are the different strategies. And of course, as you get older, you have more deductions, so the tax would be a little different if you're over 65. I didn't put over 65 because there's so many other things involved in the matters there. And I'm sorry about that figure there, but it's 15.02. That was my fault there. But how am I doing for time? Okay. Now, as a summary, as you can see, those are the three main places where your money would be: bonds or shares in companies, interest, all the things that where you can put it in. If you put it in, you can put all these in RSPs, but you've got to remember one thing: if you put it in a registered account, you're going to lose the dividend tax credit because you won't need it. But when you take the money out of your RSP, all of it will be taxable, and you won't have the advantage of that dividend or the capital gains. And you lose you get the capital gain, but you won't be able to declare a loss in a registered account, because a registered account is governed by government laws. So you're stuck in there. Your benefit is when you put it into the RSP, you get the tax break. And when you take it out, then you pay the tax. And I'll give you a suggestion there. Try not to overload yourself with RSPs and not have some open or TFSAs. Take advantage of those tax-free savings accounts, because you get a lot of money that you can get out if you have to buy a car or anything, and it's right there without being taxed. And we never had that in my generation, so I didn't have that advantage, and I had to do other planning, but I fared very well in everything I did. I think it's because I started when I was 10 years old. If you beat that one. But and I've always been financially independent since I was 10 years old. But if you don't panic, don't follow the herd, and fear and greed are your worst enemies. And all you have to do is look at Nortel for greed. With the company I was with, it was we were warned to tell everybody about the Nortel and the shape it was. This was a growth stock, and you should be telling your seniors that they are at high risk. Well, I tried it. Oh, I've gone over, but you couldn't get them to listen. So don't, low risk is low return, high risk is high return. That's it.